So I found this video about the universe having really bad world building, and as a fan of the universe, I have to object. And what's worse is he didn't call it the universe in his title. He called it Earth. That's just the writer's favorite planet in the world building. Imagine if you took something one of the writer's favorites and just God and just called the entire project after that. That's like, imagine if you called Warhammer 40k the Space Marine game. You would sound like a grandparent trying to talk about your grandchild's interests.
Because I'm a huge fan of world building, I wish I was as impressed with the Earth project
He
as
called it that
everyone
again.
else. Like, sure, with its long evolutionary history, detailed storyline, and complex magic system, this setting is amazingly full of sloppy mistakes.
That is just untrue. It has a few mistakes here and there, but those parts were written by different writers. And besides, it has a really low amount of sloppy mistakes for how detailed the world building is.
That's right, I'm stepping into the ring. Today I'm doing a full takedown of Earth's so-called realism.
It's supposed to be detailed, not realistic. Warhammer 40k world building is detailed. No one says it's realistic.
Okay, first problem, physics. At a glance, Earth's physics system seems pretty reliable, especially when compared to other pieces of media. But look close enough and you'll definitely see the sloppy oversights. Like how a human can put their hand in molten metal and avoid getting burned if they remove it fast enough.
That is intentional. That is intentional.
Supposedly, this is because of something called the Leidenfrost effect. We're in a layer of rapidly evaporating moisture.
See, he even knows it's intentional.
But I don't know. It sounds like an excuse for shoddy craftsmanship. And there's some huge incompatibility between relativistic and quantum physics. That's embarrassing.
Those were written by two different people, and it's the only major plot hole Earth has. And he's not going after the plots with plots like Swiss that have world building that has plots like Swiss cheese. That's because he has an unfair hatred of the universe.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Someone else did.
A settings magic system would typically smooth over such inconsistencies.
There is magic. They just don't call it that. They call it there is magic in the universe. They just don't call it that. They call it electricity.
But supposedly, magic isn't a thing on Earth, and any spells performed are just...
Okay, that's that's genuinely not a clever bit of trickery.
clever bits of trickery. Okay, then explain them.
That's a very clever bit of trickery, not just a clever bit of trickery.
Yes. But seriously, when your primary mode of transportation is the car, a metal creature with arcane innards that only a specialized form of wisdom...
Cars are not living things. They were made by humans for their own devices. What are you talking about?
wizard called a mechanic is able to tame, you've still got a magic system. You've just called it something else. And light is both a wave and a particle. Yeah, pretty sure that's called witchcraft.
This video is frustrating me so much.
Earth's habit of overcomplicating perfectly good systems is apparent with how the project handles the elements. The classical elements of yore kept things classy. Only playing the hits of water, fire, air elements of yore kept things classy. Only playing the hits of water, fire, air, and some variation of the earthy, rocky, minerally stuff that makes up the ground. Basically, things you can see and feel. These early systems usually had lovely symmetry and some nice rock, paper, scissors style power scaling, exactly as it should be. But uh-oh, the medieval alchemists have gotten a hold of these systems, and they want to add mercury...
He's painting this as a retcon. These are just new discoveries.
Sulfur, and salt? Okay, that's fine, Mr. von Hohenheim, as long as no one adds any more...
Sometimes complex doesn't equal bad, you know.
Oh boy, what have you done to us, Dimitri?
What did you do, Dimitri?
Now, it's a huge mess. Sure, some periodic elements like helium grant the wielder obvious powers, like levitation. Some have decent splash damage.
That's not magic, it's just physics. The only magic in this world is electricity.
Have decent splash damage, and
I mean, the universe is electricity.
some even make for horrific destruction spells. But this
Physics! It's... The only magic is electricity.
the elements means the quality control is pretty spotty. We've got Rutherfordium, Californium. Is that what it's made of?
This guy is hopeless. Californium is called that because it was only found in California.
An unenium? And that one might not even exist.
Dad. That's just the name we're given to that element. We're trying to see if it that the Earth scientists are trying to discover if it exists now.
Get out of here. Just goes
It's
to show
just a
that when it
placeholder
comes to
name.
world building, complexity isn't always more engaging. I mean,
But it's always more impressive.
no one is going to be taking a which periodic element are you quiz. Oh, that's spot on, actually. So physics is a bust. How about biology? Well, again, it's certainly complicated, but there's still no consistency between what gets included and what gets left out for being unrealistic. Past critics have rightly
It's not supposed to be realistic. It's supposed to be detailed. I've said that before.
pointed out the absurdity that unicorns are mythical within this setting, but giraffes, leopard moose camels with a 40-foot neck, give or take, are completely normal, nothing to see here, it's fine that they eat bones.
Bones hold valuable nutrients.
Also, some turkeys can spontaneously impregnate themselves, butterflies taste with their feet, and some sea turtles can breathe out their posterior. So
It's supposed to be creative and detailed, not realistic.
all that, and no dragons, feels pretty arbitrary, to be honest. But nothing's quite as arbitrary as who gets to be the star of the show: humans. Lots of these silly things rushing about, around 8 billion.
That's not arbitrary at all. Humans can bend the world to their will. It makes humans and bend Earth to their will. Well. Actually, that comparison between space marines actually that analogy of calling Warhammer 40k the space marines, strike that. Humans are ultramarines in this analogy.
Which is probably fine. They come in all different looks, but all have the same impractical drawbacks. Wisdom teeth they have to remove, appendices they have to remove.
Do you know what a vestigial organ is, right?
Goosebumps because they still think they have fur, these little fleshy eye corners because they still think they have third eyelids, foreheads they can't even directly see, oh, and most absurd of all, they can't hold their nose and hum at the same time. Wait, is that true? It is true, that's so weird.
That sounds like a kazoo cover of a Hollow Knight, a part of the Hollow Knight soundtrack. You can Who needs to hold their nose and hum at the same time? You say that like it would cause. You say these things like they would cause their extinction.
Do we buy that these things took over? On a planet with lions, crocodiles, and this thing? Oh, but humans are smart, are they? Greed, pollution, the shake weight, I could stop.
This is about it's about an analogy for hubris. I can't believe this guy.
there, but let's look at something really basic like currency. In most fictional settings, objects have value if they're made of a valuable material. Something logical, like a rare mineral or unicorn snot. But in Earth's latest chapters, most forms of value are instead tied up in hypothetical worth assigned to paper or just electronic digits. That means you have characters buying food, exchanging houses, working long hours, losing everything, going hungry, and committing atrocities all over something whose meaning is 100% theoretical. Feels a bit too pessimistic.
It's supposed to be pessimistic.
To be honest. Oh, and speaking of food and pessimism, oh no. Oh, that's not right. But forget artificial nightmare concoctions for a moment and meet Mentha specta, an all-natural plant that produces a noxious chemical compound to keep animals from chowing down. But humans call it mint and put it in their food and calming tea and toothpaste because they love that refreshing, burning flavor. They've also bred peppers to be as hot.
Do you realize these things actually are a significant advantage, and the things you listed are not a significant disadvantage?
Hot as possible because they apparently can't get enough of that sweet capsaicin, an ingredient classified as a chemical irritant and neurotoxin. Okay, maybe it does make sense these things took over. So maybe some points
finally,
there,
he
but
will.
how about geography? Because in world building, a consistent map usually means a consistent world, and Earth's map is, as you can see, wildly inconsistent. In theory, this is really the fault of Earth's shape, since flattening out a globe into a rectangular projection messes up the scale no matter what, as this country-size comparison website demonstrates. Here you can see that Australia is actually... Whoa, is that right? And Greenland is only... Really? Don't even get me started on Liechtenstein. But seriously...
This is truly creative world building. Why are you complaining?
Seriously, is it so impossible to make an accurate map? Watch, you just take both sides of the globe, and then you just sort of, okay, you just gotta, yeah, that looks right. But how about
He's even realizing.
place names? Well, not to overstep, but some of these names strike me as a bit silly, and the stories behind them are often even sillier. For example, there are upwards of 6 rivers in the UK called the River Avon. And though it's hard to find an exact source, the general theory goes that this is because when the Romans invaded and they asked the Celts, what's that river called? The Celts would say, Avon, and the Romans were like, cool, and wrote it down, not realizing Avon is just the Celtic word for river. Of course, another explanation is that whoever made this map is super lazy.
You can't appreciate a good joke to lighten the mood in a dark setting, can you?
Beyond place names, Earth linguistics are generally a bit catawampus. An effective fictional language, or conlang, should have reasonably consistent rules for the audience's benefit.
This is the most realistic part of Earth. There are lots of inconsistent languages because just like the language we speak with Italian, I mispronounced it. Italian. A lot of languages are super inconsistent, and even then, there are tons of conlangs in this world, like German, which is far more consistent.
For research, I wrote the script of this video in English. An EarthCon language is complete nonsense. This, I think we can all agree, is not a sentence. The English wiki might claim it's a sentence.
It's technically a sentence, but no English. But that's just a theoretical. But it's just a thought experiment on how nonsensical you can make a technically correct sentence. No English speaker has ever said that sentence out of that context.
But it is not correct. English spelling has equal clownery afoot. Like friends is spelled with the I before the E. Fair enough, that's apparently where it goes except after C. Unless your foreign neighbor Keith receives 8 counterfeit beige sleighs from feisty caffeinated weightlifters. Or with all these. Also, why is it, as one scholar notes, that writers write and painters paint, but fingers don't fing? Why don't hammers ham or dump?
Is not odd. Doesn't always mean that it can come from a variety of places.
Dumpsters, dumpst. Yeah, do yourself a favor and just learn Klingon. So, more points off for linguistics and geography. How about music? Well, Earth admittedly has a pretty great soundtrack. Difficult to choose a favorite. I mean, hard to beat a cuneiform classic like the Hurrian Hymn. Tree frog sounds are pretty good, waterfalls. Hieronymus Bosch gave us a definite banger with his 15th century butt music, and Purple Haze is also pretty good. No, my real complaint when it comes to Earth's soundtrack are these instruments. Because I've actually got a replica of an in-universe stringy whatever, and it doesn't sound nearly as good as Mr. Hendrix's. I looked on the wiki, and apparently learning to play an Earth instrument requires time and effort. This is apparently true for any meaningful Earth art form. And you have to be emotionally vulnerable.
That is innerly vulnerable part is not true. It's correlation, not causation. Correlation does not necessarily equal causation. Is one of the most important concepts in the universe's world building.
Definitely don't like that. But hang on, what about the storyline? Well, I skimmed through most of the plot at some place called a library, and wow, this project needs an editor. First of all, the timeline itself is way too long. Having hundreds of millions of years be all dinosaurs is ridiculous, no matter how cool they were. As it stands, the T-Rex lived further away from Stegosaurus than from modern humans, which, come on. And zero dinosaur-human overlap feels like a pretty obvious missed opportunity.
Dinosaurs are the best part of Earth, of the universe's world building. What is wrong with you?
No, birds don't count. They don't hunt people, except for that one time.
That was people hunting birds, not birds hunting people. You are such a lazy dick. And Earth doesn't have a story. The universe doesn't have a story. Dang it, you've got me saying it. The universe doesn't have a story. It was an experiment in world building with no. It was an experiment in making lore with no story.
But the timeline gets far messier. Sharks, everyone's favorite murder fish, are supposed to have been swimming around for longer than the evolution of trees. They're also...
It's supposed to be creative, not realistic.
Older than the formation of Saturn's rings, and older than one of the points in the Polaris system, aka the North Star. Yes, more ancient than the birth of an actual star. I get that sharks are a cool bit of world building, but that's overdoing it. Also, Cleopatra lived closer to the moon landing than the pyramid's construction, and there are parts of the Appalachian Mountains older than the evolution of bones.
It takes millennia to change. It takes about as long to change. It probably takes longer to change that or not organic the non-organic naturally than the organic naturally.
A timeline this muddled and lengthy makes getting invested in any one character pretty difficult.
That's the this was an experiment in world building without any story.
Tycho Brahe seems promising. He became a renowned astronomer.
Well, without any one consistent story. I guess you could count there being like billions of storylines.
Lost his nose in a duel over a mathematical formula and got a bronze one, lived in a castle, once owned 1% of the wealth in Denmark, had a pet moose that died after getting wasted and falling down the stairs, until finally Mr. Brahe himself passed away peacefully. Just kidding, he might have been murdered? Sounds like a character worth following, but Tycho was tearing it up for an all-too-short 53 years. Earth's plotline covers 4.5.
Yes. But from what the lore that wasn't a prequel to the beginning of the world of the project takes forever to get here. That I was there for that Tycho for when that Tycho Brahe storyline was being released, and it took what felt like decades to complete.
Billion years. The fleeting nature of existence is actually an issue you'll run into with every character, which makes caring about anyone, on some level, an inherently tragic experience, and I don't like it. Glass sponges have things figured out, though. The cosmic unfairness of the human condition aside, Earth's storyline leaves a lot to be desired in terms of believability. It rained frogs for a minute, a bear named Wojtek served in World War II.
It's supposed to be creative, not realistic.
And was promoted to the rank of corporal. The US government once lost a nuclear bomb. Whew, can you imagine? A dog played in the NBA, it looks like. Oh.
That's a tale in Earth. That's a human tale on Earth. I mean in the universe. So you still got me doing it.
Oh yeah, and this exists, and was sold. Humans bought this. Hey, speaking of technology, Earth is full of tech, a lot of which seems to have no function but to breed nightmares. A lot of which seems to and this exists.
Okay, that's a fair point.
Humans bought this. Hey, speaking of
even I can't get behind that.
Earth is full of tech, a lot of which seems to have no function but to breed nightmares. In keeping with this project's penchant for hypercomplexity, even the most ordinary objects have ludicrous amounts of lore behind how they're made, especially compared to other settings. I'm not sure we need all this to explain where...
Yes, but it keeps the feeling of the world built. Maybe we don't need all that much of that, but it does keep the feeling of the world building consistent.
Where bubblegum comes from. It's bubblegum. When it comes to inventions,
Okay.
humans get credit for most ideas. Dolphins came up with the printing press, but nobody tells them. And have worked their way reasonably far up the tech tree, with such hits as masonry, pottery, the wheel, what a classic. Gunpowder, splitting the atom, the internet. Uh-oh. Yes, for every smashing success like refrigeration or washing their hands, humans have created a double-edged nightmare like leaded gasoline, microplastics, Yahoo Answers. For every smashing success like refrigeration or washing their hands, humans
That's
have
supposed to
created
be
a
the part of
nightmare
the
like leaded gasoline, microplastics, Yahoo
this is supposed to be part of the pessimistic and analogy, the pessimism and analogy for hubris.
Answers. Yes, the work of an enlightened species. And this is just tech that caught on for a time. There's all sorts of insane stuff either forgotten in the past or yet to be added in future.
Oh, I forgot that point. That was that thing I said even I can't get behind. That was pretty much forgotten at the time.
Earth updates. Looking down the technological tree, it's hard not to wonder exactly where the human plotline is headed. Because there are lots of inventions that seem primed for absolutely horrific consequences. Too many, I'd argue. Like, it's a bit much to keep foreshadowing a robot apocalypse, a climate apocalypse, a nuclear apocalypse...
Analogy for hubris!
Apocalypse. You need to...
Analogy for
All
hubris.
these looming potentialities, combined with the crushing weight of mortality inherent to the human condition, it seems unrealistic that this species would be able to emotionally function at all. Well, supposedly, they've got something to help them sort through all those fears and questions of existence. It's called philosophy, and it comes in many flavors. Okay, we've got anthropocentrism, which basically says humans rule, humans are number one, they're separate from nature and definitely not still connected to a complex web of ecological interdependence beyond their control, and
Okay. We can destroy that complex web if we want to.
nothing is ever likely to take humanity down a peg. We'll see how that one works out. There are various forms of essentialism, which is the idea that all things have some set of inherent traits that determine their identity, and therefore everything can be categorized. This links back to the older theory of forms, and that time Plato defined man as a featherless biped. Behold! A man.
Okay. You're going to ignore that Diogenes plucked the chicken just to mock Plato for that idea?
Yeah, I'll be honest, far from categorizable, every single facet of the Earth seems pretty darn wiggly and determined by subjective experience to me, but what do I know? If you think essentialism is lame, but still wish things were less wiggly, there's always empiricism, the philosophy of using research and the 5 basic human senses to figure out what the universe's deal is. Pretty solid idea, although human senses are absolutely bonkers. Most have veritable labyrinths of tissue that translate acoustic vibrations in the air into electrical impulses. That's called hearing. Biological lenses that can turn reflected photons into portraits of their surroundings, or seeing. Smell is a process in which humans inhale molecules from the surrounding air, and their olfactory nerves tell them if it's pleasant or yucky. Touch seems to work the same way, except with nerves all over the body, and most humans need to touch other humans with some regularity or else they get quite sad. Seems pretty tough, to be honest. And then there's taste, where humans slather their gross, fleshy mouth organs all over something to decide if they want to consume it. Add up all those other senses that no one remembers, and you've got a pretty solid argument that empiricism and direct observation can teach you everything. Except for the problem that human senses lie to them all the time, as proven by the existence of optical illusions. Is this an old woman or a young woman? Neither. It's some sort of acorn with a funny hat. So if humans can't trust their own sensory reality, what can they trust? Well, how about the idea that every decision they've ever made was completely out of their control? This is called determinism, a cheery bit of philosophy that argues that because every event in the universe is the product of past events, free will therefore doesn't exist. Any decision a human makes, no matter how impulsive it might seem in the moment, was predetermined by brain chemicals and their environment and the fact that the Earth formed at all, and a billion other factors that would have always played out the same way no matter what. This kind of thinking leads comfortably into nihilism, the idea that life has no intrinsic meaning or value. Comforting stuff which leaves humans with limited options. There's the existentialist route, where since life has no inherent purpose, humans can instead craft their own. Or the absurdist route, where since life has no inherent purpose, humans can just do whatever. Relax if they feel like it. Nothing really matters. Or there's the route where they just feel really bummed out for perpetuity. A trend you might have noticed is that the philosophies that acknowledge the state of the world aren't very consoling. Even Stoicism, an ancient philosophy which is now hip again, is ultimately more about accepting the hardships of life than making those hardships go away. At first, I thought this was another amateur mistake, where someone forgot to add the objectively correct
It's supposed to be more, a philosophy is supposed to be about demonstrating how different individuals think, and how to console them in this, and along with religion, how to console them in this dark universe.
philosophy that fixes everything. But upon reflection, I think this might be an inherent byproduct of the fact that it is difficult to be a human. To be a character in this setting is to experience pain. Bright spots too, and seeking a greater understanding of the world can help, but human life has fundamental drawbacks no one can fully escape from. No matter one's philosophical outlook,
Maybe he's finally realizing
to experience sorrow. Good thing
maybe he's now realized. Maybe that's now clicking for him how good our worldbuilding is.
Earth is entirely fictional. Alright, let's brighten things up with some fun, ethical thought experiments. Loads of philosophies come packaged with them, like the classic trolley problem, where there's 5 humans tied to a trolley track, 1 human tied to another, and you off to the side with a lever and the power to decide which track the trolley goes down. This dilemma, of course, ignores the real question, which is, who is tying all these folks to the trolley track, and how do we get them to knock it off? Plato's cave is another famous dilemma, about being stuck in a cave or something, it seems like. Cool shadows, though. Anyway, solution here also seems pretty simple, just go and leave the cave.
You missed the point of the thought experiment. The point is, they don't know they're in a cave.
Solved. Wow, ethics are easy. Less easy are paradoxes, logical fallacies that prove how simple it is to break Earth's rules. A paradox can be as basic as writing, this sentence
There are sentences so abstract that they are neither true nor false.
is a lie, or as circuitous as the barber paradox. So imagine there's a barber who claims he shaves all those and those only who do not shave themselves. Does this barber shave himself? Well, he can't shave himself, because he only shaves those who don't shave themselves, which means he would be shaving someone who shaves himself. But if he doesn't shave himself, then he'd be someone who'd be shaved by the barber, except he's the barber, so if he shaves himself, then he's someone who shaves.
That statement could just be entirely false.
Nope, this reality is a scam. Earth sucks, we're canceling it. I could rest my case, but I've got some miscellaneous complaints. Okay, socks. One sock is always going missing in the wash, no explanation. There used to be creatures that explain this phenomenon, but it seems they've been decanonized.
He's painting this as a wetcon, when during much the same boat of unicorns, where they were never real, but people with less understanding, far lower down the text we thought they were.
Holidays, celebrated once a year, even if that holiday is based on surprise. With April Fool's Day, you've got humans messing with each other and making prank videos, but how shocking can it really be if it's the same day every solar rotation? If you really wanted to get someone, you'd upload your prank video like 2 months later on a completely random day. Also, why in a world with this fellow and this fellow and this fellow are there still no dragons? And if the writers were to add dragons, they'd probably hide them in what I believe to be Earth's out-of-bounds zone, the deep ocean. Because that place is full of creations that definitely weren't there a second ago. You're telling me this thing has been floating around in the depths for eons, yet it was only found and added to the wiki in the last decade? Yeah, not buying it. Someone's sticking designs rejected for being too out there in a place they think no one will look. They've solved it. I've got this project on the ropes. I'm declaring victory. But I think my single biggest problem with Earth, to be completely candid, is the way I sometimes feel like I'll never understand it. Which shouldn't bother me, because it's nonsensical and overly complicated, and yet I've been studying this project for what sometimes feels like my entire life, but I still find myself occasionally baffled by basic things. Like when one is supposed to have a sense of where their life is headed, or why on a planet with 8 billion humans is it so easy to feel alone, or how anyone finds the time to iron. And though I've done my best to give Earth a fair review, I still sometimes wonder if there's some obvious point I'm missing that everyone else is just aware of. I want to like this project, and I know it has potential, so maybe I should keep looking for meaning. Maybe there is something among all this noise that makes the world worthwhile.
The lack of meaning is what gives this... The lack of meaning in this world is what gives the project meaning in our world.
Like this? Whoa, this is beautiful. What is... Alright, never mind. We're raising the score 10 out of 10. Oh, hey.
Okay. We should harass this. He said the Earth's world, the worst part of Earth's world building made it good. We should harass this guy for his terrible opinions. I'll send a link to his channel to help you. That was a joke. Please do not actually harass Curious Archive.